Long before mirrors became household objects, before they were hung on bathroom walls or sold in glowing shopping malls, they were something else entirely. They were sacred. They were feared. And most of all, they were powerful. Because in the ancient world, a mirror was never just a tool to see your reflection. It was a portal, a gateway between the seen and the unseen, between the material world and the world of spirit. To look into a mirror in the ancient world was to risk seeing beyond the veil. The oldest mirrors were never meant for vanity. Archaeologists have traced the first mirrors back over 8,000 years, but these were not made of glass. They were polished obsidian black volcanic stone, shaped and smoothed into deep dark surfaces that seemed to swallow the gaze. Found in burial sites, placed in the hands of the dead, not to reflect their face but to guide their soul. Because in Mesoamerican culture, obsidian mirrors were not decorative, they were spiritual weapons. Tools of divination, portals for the shamans and priests who knew how to use them. The famous sorcerer king of the Aztecs, Tezcatlipoca, was even named Smoking Mirror, because it was believed he could see through the world of illusion and into the hidden realms through a black mirror that swirled with mist and shadow. Mirrors in Egypt, the portal of the sun. In ancient Egypt, mirrors were symbols of life and death. Crafted from polished bronze or gold, they caught the sunlight and reflected it like the eye of Ra, the sun god himself. But Egyptian mirrors were never placed randomly. They were used in funerary rituals, in magical ceremonies, in temple rites where the boundary between worlds was thinnest. Because the ancient Egyptians believed that the mirror could capture more than light. It could capture energy. It could capture a soul. And when used correctly, it could guide the spirit beyond death through the celestial realms and back to the source. That is why mirrors were often buried with the dead. Not so the deceased could see themselves, but so they could find their way home. Mirrors in ancient China, weapons against spirits. In ancient Chinese tradition, mirrors were seen as spiritual shields. The Bagua mirror, a sacred octagonal mirror, was hung above doors, on homes, or in temples not to reflect beauty, but to repel evil. Because it was believed that certain entities, spirits, demons, or lost souls could not look at their own reflection. Not because they were hideous, but because the mirror would reveal their true nature, their energetic distortion, their emptiness. Mirrors, in this case, were not only portals, they were barriers, weapons against unseen forces, tools of protection in a world where the spiritual and physical were always interwoven. The universal myth of mirrors as portals, from the mountains of Tibet to the temples of Greece, from the rainforests of South America to the sands of Egypt, one thing remained constant. Mirrors were never just mirrors. They were gates. They were eyes between worlds. The ancient Greeks believed in the power of reflective surfaces in their oracles and rituals. The practice of katoptromancy, divination by mirror, was common in mystery schools. Initiates were taught that staring into a mirror for extended periods could induce altered states of consciousness. Not hallucination, but alignment. Alignment with higher dimensions, with deeper layers of reality, where thought shaped form, where intention shaped destiny. The forgotten warning, but the mirror was never without danger. Ancient texts and oral traditions are filled with warnings. Do not stare into the mirror too long. Do not call upon what you are not ready to face. Do not open the portal unless you know how to close it. Why? Because the mirror reflects not only the visible world, It reflects your inner world. It shows you what you truly are. Your fears, your shadows, your fragmented pieces of self. It reveals not the mask you show the world, but the raw energy beneath it. And in a world that fears inner truth, what could be more dangerous? What modernity forgot? Today, mirrors are everywhere. Mass-produced, cheap, ordinary, but that was the plan. To desacralize them. To remove the fear, the wonder, the awe. To disconnect you from their original purpose. Because if the world remembered, if the world truly understood what mirrors are capable of, the system of control would fracture. Because mirrors remind us that reality is not fixed. Reality is fluid, malleable, reflected back to us according to our state of being. And those who master the mirror master their mind, master their world, master their destiny. This is why the ancient science of mirrors was hidden, buried beneath centuries of distraction. Not because it was primitive, but because it was powerful. And now, in this new age of remembering, the mirrors are calling again, not to show you your face. There is a forgotten science buried within the surface of every mirror, a knowledge older than physics, older than religion, older than the world we think we know. Because when you stand before a mirror, you are not only seeing your reflection, you are standing at the intersection of dimensions, a fragile line where perception meets creation, where thought meets energy, where reality bends in ways the modern world has chosen to forget. The ancients understood something that our science is only beginning to rediscover: that reflection is not a passive event. It is an energetic process. What you see in a mirror is not just light bouncing off your body. It is the universe creating an image of you in real time based on vibration, consciousness, and intent. A mirror is not just a surface of glass. It is a liquid field of resonance, a membrane between worlds. And like all membranes, it breathes, it listens, it remembers. Modern physics tells us that reality itself is shaped by the observer, that particles behave differently when they are watched, that the act of observation collapses waves of possibility into a single, measurable event. But the ancient mirror magicians knew this long before the words quantum mechanics ever existed. They knew that what you see is not fixed, it is fluid. It responds to you. It reflects not only your body, but your frequency. This is why, in many ancient traditions, mirrors were crafted from specific materials: obsidian, polished copper, gold, or silver metals known not just for their beauty, but for their ability to conduct energy. These were not decorative objects. They were calibrated instruments, devices designed to interact with the human energy field. When a practitioner stood before such a mirror in ritual, they were not just looking at their face, they were entering an altered state. Their energy was interacting with the energy of the mirror. And together they formed a circuit, a living feedback loop of consciousness. But this science did not end with the ancients. Even today, mirrors affect us in ways we rarely notice. Psychologists speak of the mirror effect, how long periods of staring at one's own reflection can induce strange experiences: time, distortion, dissociation, even visions. In controlled experiments, people report seeing their face shift and change in the mirror. Their features warp, their eyes glow. Sometimes they see other faces, faces from dreams or memories long forgotten. Science explains this as a brain glitch, a trick of light and fatigue. But what if it is something more? What if the mirror is showing you a part of yourself that is usually hidden? What if it is revealing not a mistake but a deeper truth? Because the human energy field, the aura, is not static, it is dynamic. It shifts based on thought, emotion, and intention, and mirrors respond to this. This is why some people feel deeply uncomfortable in certain mirrors. They sense something they cannot explain, a distortion, a presence, an echo. It is not imagination, it is interaction. And just as a mirror can reflect your energy, it can also amplify it. In feng shui, mirrors are placed not randomly, but with great care. They are used to direct energy flow within a space, to open it up or to protect it, to invite abundance or to deflect negativity. This practice is not superstition. It is ancient energetic architecture. But there is a darker side. Because what amplifies can also distort. What reflects can also trap. This is why in many traditions, mirrors are covered during times of death or grief, not out of fear, but out of respect for the power of reflection. Because in moments of heightened emotional energy, the mirror becomes highly sensitive. It can hold onto impressions, echoes of pain, memories of loss, shadows of unresolved emotion. This is the forgotten science of mirrors. They are not neutral, they are reactive. And the most powerful mirror you will ever face is not the one on your wall. It is the world itself. Because reality behaves like a mirror. It reflects your inner state, your beliefs, your expectations, your fears. What you send out returns. What you focus on expands. What you believe manifests. The ancient masters knew this. They did not waste energy fighting external circumstances. They understood that true transformation happens within. Change the reflection and the world shifts effortlessly. This is why rituals with mirrors were always preceded by inner preparation, purification, centering, alignment. Because what you bring to the mirror is what the mirror brings to you. And now, in this age of awakening, the science of mirrors is returning, not through temples or secret schools, but through direct experience. People are rediscovering the forgotten power of reflection. They are sensing the portals. They are feeling the energy. They are remembering that a mirror is not an object. It is a doorway, and the key has always been within. The deeper you travel into the forgotten corridors of ancient wisdom, the more one truth begins to echo across time and culture. Mirrors were never meant for vanity. They were portals, power, tools of mystery. Instruments used by those who knew that reality is not what it seems. Long before mirrors became household objects, they were sacred. Their use was guarded, their presence restricted. To possess a mirror was to possess access to other realms, and only the initiated were taught how to approach them. In the temples of ancient Egypt, mirrors were embedded into the rituals of the priesthood. They were crafted not merely as objects, but as keys. Bronze discs polished to brilliance were placed upon altars, aligned to catch the first and last light of the sun, not just for illumination, but for connection. They believed that the sun itself was a gateway, a divine force, and that mirrors could channel this energy into the temple, filling the chamber with the resonance of the unseen. Egyptian high priests used mirrors in ceremonies to invoke deities, to receive visions, and to guide souls beyond death. The mirror was the eye of the gods, the gateway through which light could pass from one world to another. But it was not only Egypt that understood this. In the mystical traditions of ancient Greece, mirrors were used for katoptromancy, the practice of divination through reflection. It was believed that by gazing into a specially prepared mirror, often in darkness or with candlelight, the veil between worlds would thin. The face of the seer would dissolve, replaced by visions of the future, guidance from the gods, or even glimpses of one's fate. The Oracle of Delphi, the most famous seer of the ancient world, was said to use reflective surfaces in her visionary practices. Mirrors were not used for self-admiration. They were windows into the invisible. In the Hermetic traditions that flowed from ancient Egypt into Greece and Rome, mirrors held an even deeper symbolism. They were seen as representations of the material world itself, a world of reflection, illusion, and separation from the divine source. To master the mirror was to master the world. To see through its illusions was to awaken. But no culture guarded the science of mirrors more fiercely than the ancient shamans of Mesoamerica. Among the Aztecs and Maya, mirrors were central to spiritual warfare. Obsidian mirrors, black, polished, and impossibly smooth, were the weapons of the sorcerers and priests who walked between worlds. They did not see the mirror as an object. They saw it as a being, a living surface that responded to will, intention, and energy. Shamans would use obsidian mirrors to travel beyond the physical body, entering states of trance where the spirit could leave the earth plane. They would journey to meet ancestors, spirits, or even gods, guided not by vision alone, but by the dark, swirling depths of the mirror itself. It was believed that the obsidian mirror was connected to the night sky, a fragment of cosmic darkness brought to earth. And through it, the shaman could see the threads of destiny, the energy patterns of the world, and the movements of invisible forces. In other parts of the world, the use of mirrors in esoteric traditions took even more secretive forms. In the Far East, Taoist magicians would use mirrors to trap spirits, reflect curses, or protect against unseen attacks. Certain mirrors were engraved with symbols, inscriptions, or sacred geometry, each design carefully chosen to interact with the energetic field in a specific way. In Tibetan Buddhist rituals, mirrors were sometimes placed behind sacred statues, reflecting not the physical form of the deity, but its infinite, formless essence. The mirror became a reminder that all physical reality is but a reflection of consciousness. And in the European grimoires of the Middle Ages, books of forbidden magic mirrors appear again and again, as gateways, as tools for scrying, as instruments of command over spirits. But these practices were never taught openly. They were hidden, guarded, encoded in symbols and allegories. Because those who knew the power of mirrors also knew their danger. A mirror reveals, but it also amplifies. A mirror opens, but it can also trap. The ancient adepts taught that to look into a mirror was to look into yourself, not the self of ego and mask, but the self beneath all identities. And that journey was not for the unprepared. It required purification. It required strength. It required the courage to face not only the divine but the shadow. Because the mirror shows all. It reflects what you are not, what you pretend to be. And that is why, in every esoteric tradition, the mirror was sacred. Not because of its beauty, but because of its truth. The mirror does not lie. It does not care for illusions. It reveals the invisible architecture of your being. There is a doorway in your home that you have walked past 1,000 times, a gateway you have stood before without even knowing it, silent, still, waiting. It is not locked. It was never locked. The only barrier was your belief that it was just a mirror. But what if it was never just a mirror? What if, behind the glass, behind the reflection, lies a world hidden in plain sight? For thousands of years, stories have whispered of strange things happening around mirrors, visions, disappearances, flickers of otherworldly landscapes, echoes of other versions of oneself. The modern world calls these stories superstition, fantasy, hallucination. But the ancient world called them something else. Truth. Because to those who guarded the secret sciences, mirrors were not solid objects, they were fluid thresholds, portals between layers of reality. And every culture that worked with mirrors knew that their surface was only the beginning. It begins with light. Light is not just illumination, it is information. Modern physics has shown us that light carries energy, data, and in certain conditions, even memory. But in the ancient world, this was already understood intuitively. A mirror bends light. It captures it, holds it, reconfigures it. And if light carries information, then what happens when a mirror traps the light of a person, a ritual, a dream? It becomes a recorder, an echo of energy. And with the right conditions, it becomes a doorway. Stories from ancient Egypt tell of mirrors used in rituals to open pathways to the stars. Not metaphorical stars, but real locations beyond the earthly plane. Obsidian mirrors in Mesoamerican temples were said to shimmer with strange visions during shamanic journeys. Faces not human, landscapes not of this world, sounds that vibrated in the bones more than in the ears. In medieval Europe, certain grimoires warned magicians to cover their mirrors when not in use, not to protect the mirror, but to protect themselves. Because once activated, a mirror could remain open. A crack between worlds, and things could look back. Even in recent history, strange stories continue to surface. Accounts of people meditating before a mirror, only to feel themselves slowly detach from their body. Their reflection begins to change, their environment distorts, and without realizing it, they slip. They cross over into a dreamlike space, sometimes beautiful, sometimes terrifying. A place that feels real, yet impossibly fragile. A realm where time behaves differently, where thought shapes form, where the rules of physical reality begin to dissolve. In some cases, these travelers return quickly, snap back as though waking from a dream. But others tell of struggling to return, of feeling watched, followed, as though the mirror itself had become aware of them. Ancient teachings speak of this as mirror walking, the art of moving through reflective space into parallel realities. The Tibetans called these realms bardo worlds, layers of existence that are as real as our own, but operate on different frequencies. In Hermetic teachings, it was called crossing the threshold, the ability to step beyond the density of matter into the fluid world of spirit. But entering a mirror portal was never done casually. It required preparation. The mind had to be clear, the heart steady, the intention pure, because whatever you carried within you, fear, anger, unresolved trauma, would follow you through the glass. And on the other side, thought becomes reality faster than you can speak. The mirror shows you not just as you are, but as you think you are. This is why some would emerge from the mirror deeply transformed, healed, even having confronted aspects of themselves that could not be seen in the ordinary world. And why others would return shaken, haunted by visions they could not explain. But perhaps the most powerful aspect of mirror portals is not their ability to show strange worlds. It is their ability to show you, to reveal the layers of your being that have been forgotten, to awaken memory not stored in the brain, but in the soul. Because across all these stories, from ancient Egypt to modern mystics, the common thread remains the same. The mirror does not create the portal. You do. The mirror reflects the energy you bring to it. It amplifies your consciousness until it stretches beyond its normal limits. It responds to the silent parts of you that remember how to travel. Because deep down, we have all been there before. In dreams, in visions, in moments of stillness when the world dissolves and only awareness remains. The mirror is a reminder that reality is not fixed. It is layered, and there are places waiting just beyond the edge of your reflection. Places you have always known. Places calling you home. And perhaps the greatest secret of all is this: the real portal is not in the glass. It is in you. It always was. Not every door was meant to be opened. Not every reflection is safe to look at. Throughout history, the mirror has been a symbol of beauty, mystery, and power. But hidden beneath its shimmering surface is a warning, a forgotten truth carried quietly through ancient texts, whispered in rituals, and passed down by those who understood that some knowledge comes with a price. Because mirrors do not only reflect light, they reflect energy, they reflect thought, they reflect what lives in the unseen corners of the mind. And just as they can become portals to higher realms, they can also become traps. The ancients knew this. This is why certain mirrors were covered during storms, death rituals, or moments of emotional upheaval. The fear was never about superstition. It was about energy. In the world of unseen forces, the mirror is not neutral. It remembers, it absorbs, it records. Every look, every emotion, every fragment of thought leaves an echo subtle, but real. And if that energy is not cleansed, it accumulates, it thickens, it becomes something else. In many esoteric traditions, the greatest danger of mirrors was never their ability to show the future, but their ability to trap the past. Mirrors that remained in spaces of suffering, violence, or tragedy were believed to hold imprints of those events, a residue of pain, a shadow of what once was looping endlessly within the glass. In feng shui, it is considered deeply dangerous to sleep directly across from a mirror, not because of folklore, but because your energy body expands in sleep. It becomes vulnerable. And the mirror does not discriminate. It reflects whatever energy is present, even if that energy is fragmented or lost. This is why haunted mirrors appear in stories from around the world. In ancient China, certain mirrors were called spirit traps. If a mirror was believed to hold a restless entity or negative force, it would be sealed, sometimes buried, sometimes broken to prevent whatever was trapped from escaping. In Victorian England, after a death in the home, it was customary to cover all mirrors. The belief was that the departing soul, in its disoriented state, might become confused, might mistake the mirror for a doorway, and become trapped within the reflection, unable to move on. But perhaps the most disturbing aspect of mirrors comes from the phenomenon of the watcher stories, of people standing before a mirror for too long, only to feel that their reflection is no longer their own, that something within the glass is observing them with intelligence, with awareness. This experience is often dismissed as pareidolia, the brain's tendency to see patterns where none exist. But the consistency of these reports across time and culture suggests something deeper. Some mirrors, it seems, do not only reflect, they watch. And in rare cases, they respond. Occult grimoires from the Middle Ages are filled with warnings about this. Instructions on how to consecrate a mirror, how to bind it, how to ensure that whatever energy is summoned within its surface cannot cross back into this world without permission. Because in the mirror, all things are possible. Light creates, but shadow corrupts. A mirror, improperly used, can become a feeding ground for entities that thrive on attention, obsession, or fear. It can become a window for energies that were never meant to see this world. And it can become a doorway for energies that seek to anchor themselves in the physical plane. Even in the modern world, practitioners of energy work, ritual magic, or astral travel speak of mirror parasites, thought forms, or energetic residues that latch onto those who open mirror portals without protection or clarity of purpose. These forces are not Hollywood monsters. They are subtle. They are patient. They feed not on blood but on energy, on attention, on unconsciousness. And their greatest weapon is not terror but deception. Because the most dangerous reflection is not the one that frightens you, it is the one that deceives you, the one that tells you a comforting lie, the one that lulls you into forgetting that every mirror is a threshold, a contract between your world and another. This is why ancient wisdom always placed preparation before power, purification of the body, clarity of mind, alignment of heart, because the mirror reveals what is within you. And if you step before it filled with fear, anger, or fragmentation, it will magnify these forces. It will show you not what you want to see, but what you are. This is the hidden danger of mirrors. They are perfect reflections. And in a world built on illusion, that is the most dangerous thing of all. But for those who approach with reverence, with wisdom, and with courage, the mirror is not a threat. It is a teacher, a portal, a guide. The danger lies not in the mirror itself, but in forgetting its power, in treating it as ordinary, because nothing about a mirror is ordinary. There is a reason why mirrors have haunted humanity's imagination since the dawn of time. It's not just their surface. It's not the glass. It's not even the reflection. It's what happens inside the human mind when confronted with its own image. Because the mirror does not simply reflect the body, it reflects the self. And the self is layered, fragile, and filled with secrets we hide, even from ourselves. Every ancient culture knew this truth. When you stare into a mirror, you are not just observing your face. You are looking into a map of your identity, a structure built from memory, belief, trauma, and desire. The longer you stare, the less stable that structure becomes. The mind begins to dissolve its ordinary boundaries. It begins to ask questions the waking world was designed to avoid. Who am I beyond this face? Who am I if I do not look away? Who am I without the constant noise of identity? Modern science has stumbled upon this effect without realizing its ancient roots. Psychologists call it the strange face illusion. When a person stares at their reflection in low light for extended periods, something begins to happen. Their face begins to change. Their features distort. Sometimes their face melts away, entirely replaced by shadows, unknown figures, or visions impossible to describe. Mainstream science will tell you this is a trick of the brain, a malfunction of neural processing. But this explanation reveals more than it hides. Because in that moment, the mind is not breaking down. It is breaking through the illusion that the self is solid, breaking through the boundaries of linear time, breaking through the prison of the false identity we have been programmed to wear. In ancient initiations, mirrors were used precisely for this purpose. Not to frighten, but to liberate. To dissolve the false self. To show the initiate that what they believed to be real was only a mask, a temporary projection layered over the infinite consciousness within. This is why mirror meditation is still practiced in certain hidden traditions. The seeker is told to sit before the mirror, alone, in silence, to watch their reflection until it begins to shift, until the ego cracks, until the archetypes begin to emerge not from the mirror but from within themselves. Because the human mind does not only contain the personal self, it contains the collective. the ancestral, the cosmic. Your reflection is layered with not only your story, but the story of all who came before you. Your lineage, your dreams, your forgotten lives. And the mirror can awaken these layers like ripples moving through a still pond. This is why some experience visions of past lives in the mirror, why others see beings from dreams or symbols they have never studied but somehow recognize. Because the mirror activates the hidden library within the mind. A library called memory, but not the fragile memory of names and dates. The deep memory, the cellular memory, the soul memory. And that memory is dangerous to the world of control. Because once a human remembers who they really are, the systems built on fear begin to collapse. This is why modern society drowns us in reflections of artificial beauty. Screens, filters, polished versions of ourselves designed not to awaken, but to distract. Because the last thing the system wants is for people to sit in silence before a real mirror and remember. Remember that their mind is a universe. That thought shapes reality. That belief sculpts perception. And that everything we experience outside of us began first within. Even the greatest illusions, even the false narratives of who we are, even the walls of limitation. The mirror is a teacher, but like all true teachers, it is ruthless. It shows you exactly what you need to see, not what you want to see. It reflects your fears, your wounds, your shadows, not to punish, but to free. Because once you see them, once you look into the eyes of your forgotten self, they lose their power. You stop running. You stop hiding. And in that moment, standing before the mirror, stripped of masks, you remember something ancient. That you were never just this body, never just this face, never just this name. You are a consciousness moving through reflections, and the mirror was never outside of you. It was always within, waiting, watching, and now ready to awaken. Long before mirrors became household ornaments, before their power was stripped away by modernity, before their sacred purpose was buried beneath centuries of forgetting, there existed a silent science, a technology of consciousness, a hidden art passed only through initiation from master to student, from priestess to seeker, from shaman to wanderer of other worlds. It was called mirror magic, but it was never superstition. It was a spiritual science designed to awaken, protect, and transform. And today, only fragments of that science remain scattered in forgotten texts, whispered in esoteric schools, encoded in symbols for those with eyes to see. Because mirrors were never meant for decoration. They were tools of power, keys to unlock the architecture of the universe. And the ancients knew how to use them. In Egyptian temples, mirrors were placed in sacred geometrical patterns aligned not randomly, but according to cosmic laws. They caught sunlight at specific angles during solstices and equinoxes, not just for beauty, but to amplify energy within the temple. The mirror was the eye of Ra, a transmitter of cosmic frequency. In rituals, the priest would hold the mirror before the initiate not to show their physical reflection, but to reflect their inner energy field, to read the truth of their soul, to show them what ordinary sight could never reveal. In ancient Greece, mirrors were cleansed with sea salt and sacred herbs before use. No mirror was approached casually. It was considered a living object sensitive to intention. Before scrying the act of seeking visions within a mirror, the practitioner would enter into deep meditation, aligning breath with heart, calming the waves of thought until the mind became still water. Only then could the mirror open. Only then could the images begin to form, not from the outside world, but from the deep well of inner vision. But perhaps nowhere was mirror magic more advanced than in Mesoamerican traditions. The obsidian mirror was not only a portal, it was a weapon. It was used for protection, for vision quests, for astral travel. The shaman would prepare the mirror with offerings, sometimes blood, sometimes sacred herbs, creating a bond between the object and the energy of the practitioner. They would chant ancient names, words of vibration, designed to activate resonance within the stone. They knew that words carried frequency, that sound shaped reality, and that the mirror responded not to thought alone, but to sound, to breath, to the geometry of vibration. Even in Europe, in the forgotten grimoires of the medieval magicians, detailed instructions remain. To craft a mirror for magic was to enter into a sacred contract. It had to be cleansed, consecrated, programmed with intention. Some mirrors were buried beneath the earth for days, allowing the energies of the planet to purify them. Others were exposed to starlight, absorbing the silent intelligence of the night sky. And when the time came to use the mirror, silence was essential. No mirror ritual was performed in haste. A protective circle was drawn, often with symbols encoded in ancient languages, not for show, but for energetic stability. Candles were placed strategically, not just to provide light, but to guide the energy flow. Incense filled the space not merely for scent, but to charge the air with the properties of sacred plants. And then the gaze. To look into the mirror was to enter into another space. Time slowed. Thought dissolved. Images formed, sometimes slowly, sometimes as flashes of insight. But the master practitioners knew the final secret. The real purpose of mirror magic was not to summon spirits, not to see the future, not to impress the uninitiated. The real purpose was to dissolve the illusion of separation, to reveal that the mirror was never outside. It was a reflection of the inner temple. The human being is the ultimate mirror. Your mind, your heart, your breath, they are the tools. And the external mirror was only a reminder, a reflection of the truth that all worlds, all dimensions, all portals begin within. This is why the teachings were hidden. Because a person who masters the mirror becomes impossible to control. They see through illusion. They cannot be deceived by appearances. They know that reality is shaped from within. And this is why today, the art of mirror magic is returning. Not in temples or cathedrals, but in quiet rooms, in forgotten places, where a single seeker sits before a mirror, in silence, in presence, and begins to remember. The breath slows, the gaze deepens, the illusion cracks. And on the other side, not a spirit, not a monster, not a vision, but the truth, the reflection of the infinite self, waiting, watching, awakening. If the science of mirrors was so powerful, if these techniques could awaken the hidden layers of human consciousness, why did the world forget? Why did temples fall silent? Why did rituals fade? Why were the mirrors stripped of their power and reduced to objects of vanity? The answer is simple, and it is the same answer behind every lost teaching. Because power that belongs to everyone threatens those who control. There was a time when humanity remembered. When the mirror was not a lifeless object hanging on the wall, but a sacred portal guarding the threshold between worlds. There was a time when human beings did not fear their own reflection, because they knew it was never the end of the story, it was the beginning. But the world changed. Empires rose not on wisdom, but on domination. Religions formed not to guide, but to control. And rulers, priests, kings, all understood the same terrifying truth. A population that remembers its own power cannot be enslaved. A society that knows reality is shaped from within cannot be manipulated by fear. And so the mirrors were silenced, not shattered. That would have left questions. No, the mirrors were desacralized, turned into objects of decoration, stripped of their ritual importance, rebranded as symbols of vanity, placed in every home so close yet so powerless. Because if everyone looks into a mirror every day, but never remembers what it truly is, then the most powerful technology on Earth is hidden in plain sight. This is the pattern that has shaped human history for thousands of years. The burning of the ancient libraries, the destruction of mystery schools, the demonization of the feminine wisdom keepers, the witches, the priestesses, the shamans, everywhere the same strategy. Take the sacred, twist it, make it ordinary, make it laughable, and the people will forget. The mirror was no exception, but traces of the ancient science survived in secret orders, in whispered lineages, in symbols carved into temples, in the alignment of pyramids which themselves were designed as living mirrors of the cosmos. The knowledge could not be erased completely, because truth has a way of surviving. It embeds itself in stories, in dreams, in the strange pull you feel when you look into certain symbols and feel as if you've known them forever. And so today, in this world of noise and illusion, the mirrors are waking again. Why? Because consciousness is rising. People are questioning. People are remembering. The systems of control are failing, not because they are attacked, but because they are becoming irrelevant. Because once a human being stands before a mirror and does not look away, once they see through the reflection, once they realize that they are not the image in the glass, but the presence behind the eyes, something happens. Chains begin to fall away. Illusions lose their grip. The fear evaporates. Because the greatest prison was never outside. It was built within. And the mirror was always the key to freedom. This is why the knowledge was hidden. Not because it was dangerous, but because it was liberating. Too liberating for a world built on control. But now the mirror waits, not as an object, but as an invitation, an ancient voice whispering across time. Remember. Remember who you were before the forgetting. Remember the worlds you once traveled. Remember the truth you were never supposed to lose. Because the mirror does not belong to temples. It does not belong to kings. It does not belong to secret orders. It belongs to you, to every seeker, to every soul brave enough to stand before it in stillness, in presence, in truth, and to see not the mask, not the illusion, but the infinite self that has been waiting, watching, and calling you home.